What's up, you non-explicit marks?
You
There we go.
It's gone too far.
can't
Hey,
say that.
Count, can I talk
Had,
to you in the corner of this recording real quick?
Yeah. What's up?
Bro, I think this guy's lost it. I think he's going out to pasture. We might have to cut him loose.
Are there any cows out there?
Uh, Let me check. No.
Well, what was that?
Oh my god, I think I'm blind.
I think we ruined.
You know what? I'm
Kevin's
bailing on
day.
this bit. Nope. This ain't even my
I'm
episode.
still breaking after the me just blowing the initial intro under 10 seconds into
I had to make it up by doing a bad bit.
The deleted scenes.
the deleted scene. That should just be my ringtone. Anyway, welcome to the Kevin Explains series of Kevin Explains Pro Wrestling, where I teach these two goobers all about the world of pro wrestling or sports entertainment.
Ooh, yeah.
Thank God I haven't been drinking for this, because I would definitely talk like that the entire time. That'll be its own episode.
Oh yeah.
And I'm Andre the Giant.
So we're gonna start.
I tried.
We're gonna start pretty broad here, and then we'll get into what, like, there's a lot of things going on in current day pro wrestling right now.
I love broads.
Yes.
Hate you guys. I broke all focus I had with blowing that intro.
Yeah.
We're the rowdy students. Screw you, teach.
Yeah.
That was me smoking a cigarette in class.
Yeah. What is pro wrestling? It's basically staged fighting and somewhat not actual, like, Olympic grade wrestling now.
Wait.
They actually get paid for it.
You're telling me pro wrestling isn't real?
Believe it or well, yes and no.
Oh.
So
Yeah, this is probably a good place to
it's
start.
definitely it's real, but it's also scripted. It's like theater. It's very physical theater, which is why I want to definitely talk about it more with Carter, especially when we get into the bits and stuff like that.
Right.
So,
Well, I was going to say, I worked at a Renaissance fair, and I felt like it was similar where it's like, yes, all of this is staged and pre-choreographed, but, like, there's only so much you can do to fake slamming someone into the ground.
yeah.
Like, you can absorb the blow in some ways, but your back is, your ass or back is still taking impact.
Oh, yeah. So there's so many, like a lot of the hits, like, the punches they take and stuff, it's literally like they're just ramming, like, they're just gently brushing their fist against someone's chin to make it look like a hard-hitting punch, or like they're to make it look like they're slamming their head. They do the whole, like, they put their hands down and, like, they just viciously, like, get their head as close as it could be possible without actually hitting it. And but when it comes to things like the power slams, your body slams, things like that, it's hard to fake just throwing someone onto the ground. You can't just be like, just toss them and then just be like, right before they hit the ground, just gently catch them and put them in. So what a lot of them do, well, they all should do, is they learn how to land properly. They learn how to catch each other, and they learn how to basically, like, to hurt themselves properly. So they get to escape with the most minimal amount of injury, while everything looking still really good. So the more high intensity parts are called spots. So if you see two people just locking up, that's not really one. But you see someone doing, like, a backflip out of the ring, that's like a pretty big spot. The traditional wrestling match, it's 1 versus 1, and it ends in either. There's like a million ways it could end. The most common way is pinfall or submission. So pinfall, you got their shoulders on the ground for the good old 1, 2, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 3. For,
Drag it out for
dramatic.
however long you need.
Yeah. Or a submission where you put them in what looks like to be a very painful hold, but some of them are just mildly inconvenient. And they have to tap out, or those are the two main ways. Then there's disqualifications, where someone doesn't play by the rules and they get disqualified, but it only counts if the ref sees it. If the ref doesn't see it, it never happened.
Yes, one of my favorite bits from a lot of WWE video games is you can knock out the ref, and that gives you a window to do whatever you want.
Yep. Absolutely.
Professor Bellhiggins, I hate to interrupt so early, but I have a question.
Absolutely.
In terms of the moves, because I'm familiar with Olympic-style wrestling,
yes.
How much of that technique is carried over into the WWE? Are some of the grapples and moves they're doing based on that, or is it completely independent?
So, a lot of it is actually based off of that. So you've got a lot of your suplexes and stuff, and your takedowns, and just locking up, and that is kind of like a core parts of a match. Is the grappling aspect of it, which is pretty much just your amateur style, and then you get some people who their gimmick is their bit, their act, what their character is. Or they're just legitimately trained in that style of wrestling. So some of the more popular pro wrestlers have been amateur wrestlers, and they use that style as their moves. For example, Kurt Angle, Olympic gold medalist who won it with a broken freaking neck.
Whoa.
Emphasizes that way too much in his campaigns. Guy kind of looks like a thumb now. Side note.
Good.
And he would use a lot of your amateur wrestling styles, like the suplexes that they use and stuff, the holds. And now, a current wrestler who does that, who also was in the Olympics, but I don't think he got gold, his name's Chad Gable. And he should probably get his own episode. He deserves so much more credit than he gets. But so you got people that make it their whole style. Brock Lesnar used to be that way. Shelton Benjamin, where they have this extensive background of being just an amateur wrestler to a point where they make it their whole gimmick, and they are able to use it in the ring both safely and make it look great, and make whoever they're wrestling look great. Because that's so a big term thrown around in the professional wrestling community is getting over. So getting over basically means you're winning the fans over. Whether you're the good guy, whether you're the bad guy, you make yourself look good. Or
right.
In most cases, it doesn't matter if you make yourself look good, you make the other guy look good, which is arguably the goal. Now, some people believe there's so many different ways to do it, where it's some people have won people over on their due to their social media presence. Some people have just there was a wrestler who, in his time during the WWE, it's when YouTube first started getting really big, and he had his own YouTube series that he made. And that got so many fans won over for him. And that's how he basically made himself more desirable. Because when you get over, first off, you typically win more. You get some more wins scheduled. You get more merch sales. You get the fans going, I want to see this person. And now, more recently, a lot of people have been using it on Twitter and stuff like that, just tweeting out things. Becky Lynch did a great job of making herself look $1 million on Twitter and stuff. And then you just get people that it's like Chad Gable, going back to it, where it's this is a guy who kid's a workhorse. and he makes every match look stupid insanely good, and he does like a great job, and people are just like, and he's been given like quality gimmick and then just taken through the mud with just crap gimmicks and stuff. And now he's like he took one crap gimmick, made it pretty good, and then they gave him like a slightly different, and it was like kind of a crap gimmick but still had potential to be good. And now people
How often?
love
How
it.
often do gimmicks change?
It depends on the wrestler. So, for example, you have the Undertaker, who he wrestled from 1990 very actively till I believe around 2014 ish. But
Mhm.
he would still make appearances and still formally wrestled up until 2020, or I guess 2021 was his retirement. So that's
I
a
do remember
31
that.
31 year career. Um, and now he does these one man show things, and I don't know if I'm interested in that or not. Um,
Can I
and
derail for a second?
sure,
So,
It wouldn't be Castpod if you didn't.
exactly. I would like to make a suggestion somewhere in here that maybe Carter and I give our background on what we know and what we've experienced with wrestling, and then
okay,
you can kind of like fill in blanks
all
of
right,
any like of our knowledge or like explain deeper meanings of memories that we have because of your encyclopedic knowledge
yeah,
of wrestlers and previous fights and things.
all right. So I'll finish answering Carter's question first, and then we
Yes.
can do that. So with Carter, so like the Undertaker, he was the Undertaker all 31 of those years. He was a couple of guys beforehand, but the his Undertaker, like being the Undertaker, it evolved, but he was always the Undertaker. He like there was a hot second in the late '90s, early 2000s where he was like a badass biker. He was the American badass, but he always was like the dead man, the Undertaker. And then you have some
Hmm.
people who uh, they just want to have multiple, like they just do multiple gimmicks, like Mick Foley. He had three notable gimmicks: um, Cactus Jack, Mankind, and Dude Love. And as a bit in the Royal Rumble, which is a basically a 30-man match where they release everyone at minute and 30 seconds allegedly. Um, he showed up as every single one of those personalities. I think that was Royal Rumble 2009. And then
That's pretty
sometimes
neat.
it's just like they have the, they have a gimmick for a little bit, um, like, and then things just change, or they're just like, ooh, we shouldn't do this. Like they had a Middle Eastern guy be kind of like a, it's like screw America,
The Iron Sheik.
and then no, it wasn't an Iron Sheik. He hates Hulk Hogan though, which is hilarious. I don't technically blame him now anymore, but
Yeah.
his name
Uh,
was Muhammad Hassan, and he was a whole thing. Like he had a whole gimmick. The summer of 2001, and
Wow.
you know, September happened, and
Oh
he's no
no.
longer in appearance. So
Oh no.
yeah, for really good reasons.
Christ on crackers.
Everybody
Yeah.
says Bush did 9/11, but now I know the truth.
All right. So, what is your guys' background on? What do you know about pro wrestling?
I'll let Carter go first.
Um, so for me, like all of this terminology talk is helpful because I'm not as versed in the terminology. I know broad strokes what has been happening, especially as of late, as they have gone through a pretty big overhaul.
Oh yeah.
I'm familiar with a handful of individual wrestlers. Most of my experience weirdly comes from the video games, particularly the WWE Legends game that framed itself around historic matches.
Yes.
So I have a knowledge of a handful of historic matches, such as that time Hulk Hogan lifted Andre the Giant over his head and
WrestleMania 3.
dropped him. the time Hulk Hogan went for an atomic leg drop against the Ultimate Warrior and missed,
Yep.
prompting him to lose.
2 inches.
I like
He
the
also
Ultimate
lost 2
Warrior's.
inches from his leg drops.
Oh
He
God!
literally condensed his spine.
Oh yeah, I was familiar with that because there was a big Rolling Stone piece on Hulk Hogan again when that was still cool. That was like, man, look at the sad man who gave his all for his sport, and then like a year later, everyone's like, so fuck Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
And
Actually, been saying it all along.
Yeah, he was ahead of the curve. And I'm familiar with the Rock getting beer shot at him by Stone Cold Steve Austin as
Off the truck.
the since ousted Vince McMahon had the most like "Whoa" face. And I'm also familiar with a wrestler named Asuka. Is it?
Asuka.
Who I heard was like an up and comer a few years ago, but I don't know what they're doing now.
So, she still with the WWE. When she first started, she was on their developmental brand NXT, which I'll go through like the different like major companies.
That would be helpful.
And stuff.
Yes,
I'm gonna go through that after we get your baseline knowledge and kind of talk about some of the current events. So Asuka, great wrestler from Japan, wrestled in Japan for a bunch of years. Went to NXT, remained undefeated for well over a year. She moves to the main roster, where she still is today, and she was in the championship picture very much at first, and then she kind of dropped down a little bit with like injuries and stuff, and now she's kind of like she's part of the main event, but she like storyline with the women superstars, but she's a little bit on the side character. She's like the champion's friend kind of role. Also, I should mention with terminology, superstar is the term for the wrestler, and it's like for the WWE, and it's across the board. It's basically men's superstar, women's superstar. Women used to be called divas. That's an era of the mid 2000s that is. I just poked Bean in the face.
No.
Not the Bean.
Yeah, that's an era of the 2000s. That's its own segment. All right. So, Callum, what is your knowledge of pro wrestling besides my typically late at night ramblings to you?
That's true. Recent years, I've become much more familiar with wrestling things because of clips that you have sent me, or random insights onto interesting wrestlers, or the little quizzes that we used to do.
Yeah.
But before that, on very rare occasions, I would be scrolling around the TV channels late at night when I should have been asleep, and instead of watching Family Guy, sometimes I would stumble upon wrestling. And I would be like, what is this? What's going on here? And I found, some interesting things. One thing that always stuck out to me, because back then I didn't know if wrestling was real or not, was how long it took them to stand up after getting hit. I was like,
Oh, yeah.
I get it. It must have hurt, but like these guys are down for like 5 minutes, just kind of. They're acting like evil henchmen in Power Rangers. You get hit once, and then you just kind of writhe on the ground for a while. Like, geez, they must be really knocking them around in there.
Yeah, that's all drama. Or well, it's getting it's a little bit of just taking a breather and taking a second after like some heavy hitting action. But it's also to build drama, and there's some things that they do to help. They know how to help build drama. For example, in a tag team match, like a person will be slowly crawling to their side after being knocked down, and like the other person's like winded going to their side, and the person, typically the guy you want to tag out, the good guys tie. Good guys are also known as baby faces or faces. the bad guys are known as heels. So
Huh.
the face side, you'll see him like reaching out, like struggling to get them, and he'll be the guy who's supposed to tag in will hold his hand out, palm side down, and that's kind of like a secret little like don't like struggle still, don't go for like the leap to tag me in yet, just
Mm.
like build it up, and then so they could have this whole like the two fresh guys just going at it right away. And then when the fresh heel comes in, you'll see him flip over his palm, and then all of a sudden he gets the leap of courage to tag himself out.
The thing I always think of is when it's like a ladder match and
Oh
like
yeah,
everybody's crawling on the ground except for one guy who is very like slowly but surely making his way up the ladder, and right when you think he's gonna get up there, just boom right in the back and the ladder falls over and then everybody's on the
Ah!
ground again. And it's
yeah.
like, ah.
No,
Those
it's
ones always stress me out because I'm like, man, someone's gonna break their leg.
yeah. That's also gonna dive into later to this episode, because there is a pay per view on Saturday, or I guess premium live
Ooh.
event for Peacock, um, for Extreme Rules, and it's in Philly.
Oh.
Are you going?
I'm not going because I'm gonna go have dinner with my grandparents.
Well,
Oh.
that's also nice.
But so like yeah, those matches with like ladders and stuff, they'll make them out of like lighter materials and stuff that won't hurt as much as like steel. It'll be like
Yeah.
hollow on the inside and stuff. Or like the tables will be kind of already pre like scored on the bottom, so they don't have like so they're made to fold easier.
Oh,
Like
please. Bills
certain
fans use
supports will
real
make
ass
them.
tables.
Yeah, that's true, which makes them kind of terrifying in my opinion. But
Oh,
it's
yes.
also it's stuff like a lot of the stuff is meant to break the fall. Like if you
Yeah.
notice in those ladder matches when he's getting pushed off the ladder, there's always something like there will be like the tables behind him, which they buckle pretty quickly because they're not made to just stop. They're made to slow, kind of like a parachute. Or if you notice, there'll be like a group of people or some people, and the proper way of handling it is if someone's like going to jump into the crowd, the people in the crowd's entire goal to make sure nothing bad is to make sure nothing bad happens to the person jumping, because that's gonna hurt them a lot more than it's gonna hurt you. And you
Makes
get
sense.
some people like the Dudley Boys and a lot of more like the original like older school wrestlers that take that to a T, and then you got into this little bit of a period where you're just looking for the next who could be the next guy and not really focusing on your like the people that are already experienced being pro wrestlers, and
Right.
trying to build your own homegrown talent.
Gotcha.
All right.
And then to continue, I have a specific memory of my sister one time walking into my room while wrestling was on the TV, and she makes a disgusted face and goes, "You watch wrestling?" And I went, "No." And then I changed back to Family Guy. Because I didn't actually watch wrestling. It would just be occasionally on. But I do remember one time tuning into it for a few minutes and being astounded that the guys wrestling, like there's two guys like fighting, and then next to him is a guy in the same outfit as one of the fighters, and he's playing the trombone.
Yes, the New Day. The New Day. So the New Day is arguably one of the biggest stable. So a tag team is only two individuals.
Mm.
A stable is more than two individuals. Um, for terminology's sake. So
Mhm.
the New Day, who have been together for like one of the longest reigning current tag teams, or not like they are one of the longest reigning champs, but they're like the longest staying together, pretty much.
Mm.
And they first started off kind of serious of like a we deserve a chance reputation, which quickly just molded into them being themselves, the lovable goofballs they are.
Hmm. Hmm.
The guy that plays the trombone, Xavier Woods, he is actually has his own gaming YouTube channel, Up Down Down, where he does a lot of content with other WWE wrestlers,
Love that.
and he's with Kofi Kingston, who's been in the business. He's been in the WWE since he debuted a little bit before I started wrestling, which was I think 2000, like when I started watching, which was like 2006, and he's still in it today, which is
Oh.
which going back even 10 years was absurd. Like The Rock's WWE career was not very long. It was only like 6 years, I think, maybe 7. It was not a
Wow.
long career. And you get people that are wrestling for over 15 years and stuff now.
Jeez.
Same with Steve Austin. His WWE career was very short.
The Stone Cold.
Yeah, the Stone Cold.
Crazy.
So it's Xavier Woods, the trombone guy, then Kofi Kingston, who's a great high flyer, like very athletic individual, and then you got Big E, who is just a monstrous truck of a man, and he's awesome. They're all so going back to the getting over part. Like at first it was like they were kind of a hit, but then they just let themselves. Just were themselves, and everyone loves them now. They're so huge.
They were very entertaining, even back whenever that was, which must have been quite a while ago.
Yeah.
But then the final major influence of wrestling on me, because I can talk about how I remember how everybody remembers Fred's dad, one of the most famous wrestlers of them all. You can't see him, but Fred can.
What a
right.
stupid bit. Right.
Am I right?
You're
Am I right?
100%
What the
right.
fuck are you? Oh,
Fred.
I remember now.
Yeah.
I literally was like, my brain was literally like, what the fuck are you guys alluding to?
Yeah, no.
I can talk
the
about
whole thing.
I can talk about all the memes of Vince McMahon. I can talk about my favorite wrestler from middle school, Kevin Bell Higgins. But
That dud of a wrestler.
but I remember very distinctly, and I brought this up to Kevin before. I was on a plane. I can't remember where it was for, but I saw a movie, and I believe it was called Fighting in the Family.
Yes.
Yes.
And I watched that movie. It was very entertaining. Like, I have no real stake in wrestling, but I found it very entertaining. And part of why I found it very entertaining was the lead actress I thought was incredibly attractive, and I was crushing so hard on her all the way through the movie. Hang on. And I thought, I don't know why I thought this. I must have looked something up, but looked it up wrong. I thought the lead actress of that, Kevin will explain what like the story is and who the characters are and whatever, was played by Sophie Turner, Joe Jonas's wife, who is a very attractive lady. And I was like, wow, Sophie Turner is attractive. But it turns out, no. I mean, she is. She played X-Men movies that nobody watched. But it was actually Florence Pugh.
Mm-hmm.
And she's known colloquially, Florence Pugh.
That's what
That's
I
an
call her.
SNL bit.
But yeah, who I like, but I didn't know that at the time. And then flash forward to more recent times when I watched the Black Widow movie that had Florence Pugh in it, and I was like, oh my god, this woman has stolen my heart. And then it wasn't until maybe like a month ago that I realized that she was the main actress in Fighting in the Family. I'm like, I've been in love with her this whole time, and I had no idea.
Jesus Christ.
She just keeps finding her way into my life, and yeah. Hi, Florence. I hear you're no longer dating Zach Braff from Scrubs. Hit me
I'm
up.
shooting a shot on a podcast no one's gonna listen to. So, Fighting in My Family, which is the name of the movie, is based off of the career or the life of Paige, who is a lady wrestler from London. I don't know exactly where off the top of my head. And she was raised by wrestlers, like her parents were wrestlers, and it's basically her story of being seen and when she tried out and she became Paige and not Soraya, and talking about her, like kind of going through her journey to her career and stuff. And it also stars The Rock as a couple major roles.
Yeah, she meets The Rock.
Yeah, and it basically goes through her from getting getting like trying out for the WWE to getting her debut match, which was one of the probably one of the best debuts on the main roster in a while, or like in a while at the time, where she was so WrestleMania is the biggest pay-per-view of the WWE. That's kind of like the creme de la creme a la Edgar. And after WrestleMania, like the night after WrestleMania is like Monday Night Raw, and that's like we're gonna start all these new storylines. We're gonna bring in these new people. And a lot of the fans buy a whole pass that's goes from basically the Friday before WrestleMania to the Monday after, where it's like 3 shows, lots of wrestling and stuff. And the Monday night fans are some of the most bizarre, like rowdy fans ever. And she debuted the Monday after WrestleMania, and in when the current Divas champion, that was the actual title, was just like, all right, who wants me? Like, open challenge. Next person comes down, they get a title shot, and that's where Paige made her main roster debut and beat AJ Lee for the title.
Dang.
And
I remember texting you right after I watched that movie and saying how attractive the actress was, and you're like, yeah, the wrestler's pretty attractive too. I'm pretty sure her nudes leaked. And I was like, this is good information to know.
Yeah. Unfortunately, her life kind of went downhill a little bit after that ish for a hot minute, where abusive relationships, her nudes got leaked. She had a career-ending neck injury.
Oh God!
Where she was still under contract, but with the WWE for up until like, I think, this last July, where she now works at another company, AEW. But she was on the shelf due to her injury, doing like background stuff, interview things like that for literally the last almost 10 years.
Yeah, they didn't have that part in the movie.
Yeah, which is, it's real sad because it's like was like a good wrestler, but she just kind of got like, you can legitimately get hurt and stuff doing this stuff. So she got pretty bad boo-boo.
Yeah.
All right.
But that's it.
So before we get into like the main companies and stuff, is there any questions just on anything yet? Generic terms.
What wrestler is Wrath from Ben 10 based on?
Typically Macho Man.
Nice.
I feel like if there's any,
Wrath's gonna take you down.
Let me tell you
something. I feel like 90% of pop culture wrestlers are based around macho.
Yeah, so it's like partially true, but also like partially untrue, just because you got the Macho Man, Hulk Hogan, and the Ultimate Warrior, who they're all pretty different, but if you do an impression of them, it's very minor.
They
Like
get blurred.
they get so blurred, and if you're not, and if you want to just make it a little bit loose, then like on the character for copyright stuff and avoiding lawsuits, it's very easy to just be like, "Oh, I'm not the Macho Man," and it's like 'cause you throw in a couple extra like Hulk Hogan brother kind of things, and
Everybody
it's
says
just like that.
brother.
Yeah, everyone said brother in the '80s.
Yeah,
Um,
weird
I
time.
know Rey Mysterio too.
yeah,
That's another
still
wrestler now I know.
still very active to this day. Just had his like 20th anniversary with the WWE.
Ooh.
Wow.
So we're gonna end with the WWE because there's a lot going on there that's more enjoyable.
Hmm.
So there's basically four super big promotions right now, and there's also like hundreds of smaller ones. So in my opinion, the four biggest ones is you got New Japan out in Japan, so it's NJPW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and then
Hmm.
stateside there's like it used to be all territories where it's like you got the Mid South, you got the like Ozark area, you got Ohio, um,
The
and now
NFC, the AFC.
pretty much, and you got the now you
Yeah,
got
you
like
learned something.
major, you got the major companies where the top three, like the three big major companies, the is the smallest one is Impact, which used to be TNA, and that used to be WWE's biggest rival for a good bunch of years, and then they just declined quality, and now they're starting to make a resurgence again. And now you got WWE's current like huge competitor of AEW, All Elite Wrestling, where the CEO is Tony Khan, son of the Jaguars owner. Fun fact.
Oh,
Um,
Oh yeah, and they're way
and
more invested in that than they are football. Let me tell you.
they absolutely are. Um, and a bunch of executive vice presidents were pro wrestlers that were huge in Japan. So they started in 2019. Like they're a very new company, but it's fitting the atmosphere that the pro wrestling scene needed at the time,
Mhm.
because you basically had like for like the second half of the 2010s, you got like some of the smaller promotions like Ring of Honor, Impact, things like that, which Ring of Honor was a smaller promotion that's now bought out by EC or AEW. And then you have the juggernaut that is the WWE. So you
That's
have,
the one I know.
yeah, AEW. It started with a bunch of wrestlers going. It's like, you know what, we could throw our own like huge event, and they did All In, which was a huge success, enough that they started their own like separate brand like promotion due to it, with like Tony Khan helping back the company. And you had the Elite, which is a stable, or I guess technically sub stable of the Bullet Club at the time. So the Bullet Club is going to get its own episode. Huge stable in New Japan. Um, and the Elite, which is the Young Bucks, Matt and Nick Jackson, as well as Kenny Omega, arguably one of the best wrestlers on the scene today. I believe.
mm.
No, he wasn't the number one. Roman Reigns got number one for the PWI's top 500 wrestlers this year, but he's
How
won it
does he
multiple
compare
times.
to Kenny O'Mac?
Better in every way.
Oh.
So, step one, taller. Step two, not in a crazy amount of debt.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty much everything.
So they came in hot starting their company, and it's like these are three huge names in Japan, and you got your more hardcore fans knowing who they are, going like, "Oh snap, they're starting something big." And then a name that like, as well as Cody Rhodes, who was in the WWE. His dad was huge back in the 70s and 80s, and even the 90s too, with like the NWA and back in the more territory days. And then he was in the WWE, and they gave him a like he was doing good, building his character, doing great, and then they gave him Stardust, which is just a terrible character. And he made it work for him, and then when his contract was up, he was like, "Nope."
Oh,
And he went from like, I don't know the exact numbers, but before he left the WWE, he was like on like a at most $100,000 year contract, and he went out, did his own thing, did smaller shows, went to Japan for a while, and he came like helped start AEW, and then Cody Rhodes actually returned to the WWE in at this year's WrestleMania for at least 10 times the amount of money he was making, if not more.
I do like this idea of wrestlers being almost like old Hollywood stars, where like studios would just have actors contracted to them and only to work with them,
Yeah,
and they would just keep giving them roles, and eventually they could be like, you don't know how to use me. I'm gonna like you don't know how to give me the right roles for my skill set, and then they can just go to it. Then they just go to a different studio.
that's pretty much what a bunch. So like, it happened a little bit when TNA started. So going back a little for a while, WWE for since the 90s has almost always had a competitor.
Mhm.
In like the late 90s, early 2000s, it was WCW, which was World Championship Wrestling, which the WWE eventually bought out. Um, but they were fighting every Monday night in the ratings for pro wrestling, and that's when pro wrestling was huge. So they call it the Attitude Era / Monday Night Wars.
Mhm.
And then WWE basically had more money, bought them out, and took some of the wrestlers and stuff. And then TNA started not too long after that, where a bunch of the wrestlers that didn't want to go to the WWE from WCW started there, and people that weren't happy with their rankings in the WWE also went over. It's like, oh, my contract's up. Here's another big brand. There's some oomph to my name. And that basically happened again with AEW, where like TNA ran its course, did good, then did bad, and when AEW is just starting off, it's like all these wrestlers that aren't happy or they think they have more to accomplish can just be like huge stars. For example, a name you might know, Chris Jericho. Dude's been wrestling
yes.
since the 90s, and he was in a very solid position all throughout his WWE career. They made some choices that annoyed him, and when his contract was up, he would talk to Vince directly and be like, "All right, this is not working. I'm gonna go to the other guys." And and Vince was like, "All right, sounds good." Because Vince, for all the scummy things he's done, which we'll talk about in a second, um, when he cared about it, like if he cared about you as a wrestler, he wanted you to be happy. He wanted you to be good.
Hmm.
And so when Jericho was like, "I'm out of here," Vince kind of was like, "You have my blessing." And he was, in my opinion, the big like. Sure, they had a lot of big names from Japan, like they would show at press conferences and stuff before their first pay per view, and like from like Ring of Honor and smaller promotions, and like think just independent wrestlers who would jump from show to show, and were just by appearance booking. But the Kenny Omega versus Chris Jericho happened in Japan a couple times, and then it's like this is top tier wrestling. And for AEW's first press conference, they had Chris Jericho show up. That's something that like WWE fans know him, Japan fans know about him. It's like this is putting them like this went from like smaller group of guys trying to make something big happen to this is big. Things are happening. And then you had in the first couple of like months, you had big presence after big presence showing up that were like unhappy with, like they would leave their WWE contract and go. And like their first big pay-per-view, Jon Moxley, who was Dean Ambrose in WWE, who was big, showed up at AEW, like complete surprise to everyone. And that's how they ended the night. And it's like, welcome to the map. Can you keep it going? And
Right.
something that AEW does very well that WWE did not at the time, did not when they started. So first, AEW has some of their matches, like they have their main show Dynamite, they have their secondary show Rampage, and then they have a bunch of different other shows and interview segments and stuff that is on their that is on YouTube. And it show classes some of their lower like tier wrestlers and stuff like that. But it's just on YouTube for free to watch whenever, which is like, in my opinion, very smart move because they had it, and then the Young Bucks for the last bunch of years, like since May 2016, I just looked it up. They've had their YouTube series Being the Elite, which at first was just like, this is our behind the scenes vlog kind of style, and like what's going on when we're not working in Japan and stuff. And then they would do like funny bits and stuff with wrestlers and such. And they started like showing debuts and stuff and building in storyline stuff with it, which was but they're still like having fun and goofing around a little bit, which is awesome. So like they have a very big and very good presence for like the social media side of things and the YouTube aspect, which WWE doesn't have. Also, AEW wrestlers are able to wrestle for other promotions. If you're with the WWE, you can only wrestle for the WWE or like a very specific one or two other shows, and that's for kind of side promotions, not of WWE, not like completely different companies. Like that's it. But like they brought in wrestlers from Impact to wrestle on AEW. They brought wrestlers from New Japan. They had a excellent pay-per-view called Forbidden Door, where it was AEW wrestler versus New Japan wrestler for every match, pretty much. And then they have like AAA down in Mexico, all over the place, going there. So they have like a lot of structure to become something fantastic. However, this last couple of months, they've taken a pretty big dive because
Before you say that, I want to cut in and just say that AEW being like these new guys that take the big name wrestlers from the big name company, reminds me of when Hololive fired Uruha Rushia and Kiryu Koko, and then they got hired by V Shoujo to become Keisan and Amemiya Nazuna. Welcome to Callum Explains, VTubers, everybody.
Get out of
You've
here.
been fooled this whole time.
We
It's
were
my
having a nice
episode.
time. No,
This is my episode now.
Yeah, but,
go back the way it came.
Yondaime Hokage.
So, with that, but recently, like the last couple of months, the backstage atmosphere of AEW a lot of their big name talents have just been getting into huge fights, like legitimate fist fight brawls. Like people are
Oh,
suspended, people got their titles taken away, matches taken away.
during the
Like
match or like
after,
outside?
like
Okay.
afterwards,
Hmm.
like huge things are happening with that, and like there was a huge fight between the Elite, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks versus CM Punk, who was a WWE guy, left because he was honestly rightfully unhappy where they didn't take his like he's like I'm super sick and injured. I need time off, and they're like, and Vince is like, no, you don't. Go to our doctors, and the doctor's like, oh yeah, it's fine, Vince. And he's like, went to a doctor outside of the company, and it's like, dude, you need to chill.
Like when I
Um,
broke my collarbone.
Pretty much, actually. They didn't
Or
like that.
like, or like when the NFL's independent neurosurgeon told Tua Tagovailoa, "Yeah, he can play. It'll be fine."
Yeah,
4 days
it
rest
wasn't that.
after what was obviously a concussion.
It
It's
And
wasn't
perfect.
then
that
Will Smith showed
extreme,
up.
but it was pretty bad. But he showed up, and he's in AEW now, and the exact happenings of what happened back there are still not like fully revealed. But the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega got into a fight with CM Punk for something he said. CM Punk threw the first punch, and these are like actual punches. But
Oh,
the Young Bucks
Jesus.
either knocked on his locker room door or just opened his locker room door. So he was like, they, the Young Bucks in started it, but CM Punk escalated it, and they all
hmm.
ended suspended. They all won titles at the pay per view, which was the like a couple days, but like not even days, a couple hours before it all happened, and like the, all those titles were stripped. Everyone that was involved got suspended. Um, like even the people like Kenny Omega was allegedly trying to protect someone's dog that was in the locker room from the scrum, and
Oh my
one of
God.
the side people off to the side like freaking bit him or something
Bit
like
the
someone.
dog?
So no, the
Jesus.
person, someone like legit
Oh,
got
Okay,
bit.
that's a.
Someone legit got bit, and things are going like
it was like, screw your dog. Just bites.
things
Ah.
aren't 100% clear. And then you have like this last week, two of their stars that were like mid card, so like they would be shown in the middle of the show, but they would still be good enough to be like scheduled very consistently. Um, they would, they got into just a huge Twitter fight the other day, and then apparently they got into a backstage brawl where like one guy actually threw punches, the other guy was like just kind of stood there, like more or less took it, which was kind of a smarter aspect to do. But yeah, some crazy stuff that's happening.
Seriously.
It's just like, and it's like big fight, and then you got the leaders of the locker room, basically your veterans and stuff, just being like, all right, listen up, this is what shit happens and stuff like that, or how we're gonna rectify this, and then would do that, and just now there's like another fight. Now there's people being unhappy because of this, and it's just like there's so many mixed messages of what's coming out of that locker room that it's so confusing. All right,
It's just boys in locker room talk, you know?
all right. And due to timeliness sake, the next episode I'm just gonna completely explain the WWE and what's going on and what is happening there.
Woo!
Yes, which I have some functional knowledge of, which will help.
Yep. So we're gonna send y'all a good night, and we will see
Well,
you
wait.
next. What?
You have to give us wrestler names.
Oh yeah. Well,
Can
judging
I be the
by
flying not Hawaiian?
fine,
I just thought of that, and I was like, this is an idea so genius, I must say it.
so if we're judging by the names on the WWE game, which there
Hmm.
might be a series coming out in the future,
What?
God.
Carter's just Carter.
Ah.
Kind of like Cher, like where it's like
Yeah,
one
I'm
name
Madonna.
only. And then Callum is
People
Lizard
know
Prime.
who I am.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious because when Sydney asked like what you guys do, and I was like, I don't know, I don't know how to describe it. Like lizard stuff. They're like lizard scientists. And
Yeah.
Sydney literally went, "What the fuck does that even mean?" and
Yeah.
proceeded to post a picture of the lizard from Spider-Man.
That's exactly it.
That's pretty much it, yeah. That sums us up pretty well. Alright. So tune in next time for the Kevin explains the WWE and what's going on there.
Mm-hmm. I've been
Bye.
Lizard
Good
Prime.
night. And I'm just Carter.